Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining me on another episode of Why I Love Volusia County, your local podcast spotlighting local businesses and local residents on what they love about being a part of Volusia. So today, I'm super excited to have my guest Herb with us today. Herb, thank you so much for the time today. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
Of course. Well, I'm really excited to get into it because I know that there's a lot of things that I am excited to learn about what you're doing and all that stuff. We re-met, I should say, at the Port Orange BNI chapter, and you're also part of BNI with education and helping people out, making sure they're on track, and also making sure that they're getting the most out of being a part of BNI. And if anyone doesn't know what BNI is, it's a great networking group. Go check it out. There's probably a chapter local to you.
Right.
Anyway, so do you want to kind of kick us off and tell me a little bit about your journey coming to Volusia or just being in Volusia and how's that been?
Yeah, so it's been great. It's been like coming home. So I grew up in Orlando, and both my wife and I were raised in that Orlando area through our kind of high school years. We started our family in Lake Mary, and then we ended up moving to Sarasota for a job opportunity for her back in 2010, and we spent probably the next six or so years there. And then she got a job opportunity back here in Volusia for a orthopedic practice, and it was a great opportunity for me to start thinking about transition from my career at that point, which was law enforcement. I'd been in for about 22 years,
Oh,
so it was getting to a point where I was ready to retire and do something different. And so we decided, hey, let's take a chance, move kind of back what we think, what we equate as home, which was Volusia County, and we settled down in Daytona Beach, Ormond Beach area, and it's been a
nice.
been a great move.
Yeah. So
Whole different pace.
you guys have been
Yeah,
all over the state of Florida. I mean, there's still some parts of Florida, obviously, that you haven't lived, but I
we
mean,
got central we
east.
got central covered pretty well from
Yeah,
like east to west. So
do you have any things that you guys notice that they do in Tampa that they don't do over here? Anything they do in Orlando that we also do there here in Volusia? Anything like that? Just curious.
yeah, so it's just interesting. The communities are just a little bit different in the just the things that they have. It's the You see a lot of people from the New England states that have relocated down on the West Coast. So they've kind of brought some of their things that they like to do uh, down to the West Coast, and then you've got on the East Coast a lot of people who have relocated from say New York and other areas. So it's been interesting
Oh,
to see where there's little changes here and there, but overall, both are fantastic places. Just over here, because this is where we would always spend spring breaks and summers and everything. From being from Orlando, this was more like home to us, and we had a lot of our friends still kind of over in this area. So
oh yeah. That's so interesting. I hadn't known that about, the Sarasota, Tampa area that a lot of people are mostly from New England is what you said, right?
you get a lot of people that relocate from New England,
Oh.
Michigan, Ohio, um,
Oh.
on there. So it's just kind of interesting to see how different states have kind of chosen the
That
areas that
yeah,
they
because
like
there's
to migrate to.
yeah, because I know that there are a lot of New York, New Jersey people here in Flagler and in Volusia. That's where I feel like the majority of people are from. And I was always like, where are my Michigan people? Because I'm originally from Michigan. I'm like, where are they? Like, I feel like there's so many North people, none from Michigan. So now I
Yeah,
guess I know where I
you're on
need
the
to
wrong
go.
coast. Yeah, you're on the wrong
I
coast.
missed the memo apparently.
Yeah,
No one told me beforehand, so I guess I'm gonna have to go over there and go seek them out. I actually, now that you're saying that, I was in Tampa not too long ago, and I saw a restaurant that had Detroit style pizza. And now that you're saying that, I'm like, that makes sense because I was so confused. I'm like, why is Detroit style pizza on this like
right.
pier in Tampa? It's so strange to me. Hey, now you
There
learn
you go.
something new every
Now you
podcast,
now
so
you
this
know,
is
right?
great.
Yeah.
Yeah, so now I know where I need to go more often. But do you want to share a little bit? So you mentioned a career transition, especially from law enforcement, which is a very physically taxing and even mentally taxing field to be in, and to coming to now what you're doing now. Do you want to kind of explain maybe that transition and kind of explain what you're doing now?
Yeah, so back in 2005, was having a conversation with my father-in-law, who is in business brokerage. And for anybody that doesn't really understand what business brokerage is, it's similar to real estate, in that we help buyers and sellers purchase something. However, for business brokerage, we're helping people buy an actual business. So there may be no real estate associated with it. So if you think, somebody owns a barber shop, but they don't own the real estate, they're just leasing the space. But eventually they want to maybe sell that barber shop. So we're the ones that help him identify how much that barber shop's worth. And we confidentially market it and find the right buyer, put the deal together, see it through closing. That's kind of the simplified version of it. The glorified version is mergers and acquisitions, is what people will typically hear, where essentially you're helping people transition ownership of a business from one person to the next. But we do that on a small scale. We do it on a little bit larger scale. We're kind of what you would call a boutique business brokerage firm. And so the way I ended up getting into it is he just my father-in-law kind of talked me into it. He said, "Hey, go get your real estate license. I think you would do well with this." For me, I was looking at what I might be able to do after law enforcement. That wasn't necessarily a typical cop job. It's like working security or going to, working corporate security. So this really gave me kind of a different avenue. So I was able to do it part-time. And then when I finally retired, when we moved back over to Volusia, it was a great opportunity for me to go ahead and just kind of take over the operations on the business. And so now we have about 25 agents around the
Wow,
state of Florida,
nice.
based out of Volusia County and Daytona, but we've got an office in Jacksonville, one in Lake Mary, and another over in Tampa.
That's so cool. And I'm glad that you went into a little bit more of what that means because I think, we can have an idea, but sometimes, unless you're in that position where you're ready to sell, you don't think about everything that goes into the sale, right? You're like, oh, I can
Right.
just find a buyer, it's done. It's like, well, no, there's obviously a lot of things you need to take care of. And I'm sure you see that all the time where someone's like, I want to sell right now. And you're like, wait a minute, we haven't situated anything yet. We
Right.
don't know what's happening right now.
Yeah, we wish it was. Yeah, sometimes we wish it was that simple of just kind of throw it on the market, but it's and you find a buyer. But the reality is, more often than not, somebody is actually buying a job, and that's really what the owner of the business is selling is kind of a job. Now they may have it made to where it's a pretty lucrative job, or it might be a little bit easier than if you're working for somebody and you control your own destiny. But at the end of the day, that's what people are realistically buying when they're
Sure.
looking at kind of smaller Main Street businesses. So
Hmm.
it's trying to make sure that it is the best possible business to go on the market, meaning the financials are clean, the seller's got some systems in place, some basic things that a buyer's going to want to look for to give them the highest probability of selling it. That's what we really strive for when we first sit down with a client.
Oh, that's super cool to know. I think I know like a few of those things, but it's great to hear from obviously the expert of what you guys are doing. So that's great. What should maybe people like if someone's watching this and they're like, oh, I had been thinking about that. What would be a good sign for someone to see and go, oh yeah, this is probably when I should start calling her, but this is the one I should start seeking like an expert's opinion.
Yeah, so when we always will tell people there's only one reason to start a business, and that's to eventually sell it. The meaning behind that is if you start with the end in mind, meaning that you are eventually going to sell the business, you'll always really be prepared to sell the business whenever that time comes. Um, the unfortunate thing is a lot of business owners are so busy working in the business that they don't lift their head up long enough to really take a look at where they are in life and start planning down the road to say, okay, in 5 years, I want to be out of the business, which means if they're 5 years away from that point, we should really be talking now
Oh,
because
okay.
we want to be able to identify any potential issues that they have going on in the business that can be rectified. A lot of times it's financial issues, and I don't mean
Mm.
that they're struggling financially, but it might mean that they are spending personally through the business, which is that's an issue that can cause issues down the road. They may have unreported income. We always tell them every dollar that you shelter from Uncle Sam is saving you about 25 cents in taxes, but it's probably going to cost you $2 to $3 in purchase price for every dollar. So
Oh,
shelter $100,000 from Uncle Sam, you're saving 25,000 in taxes, but you're probably losing 200 to 300,000 in sale value. So there can be
wow.
major mistakes that they're making. So here's the key thing. If we can talk to them soon enough, educate them, they can start making some changes to their habits so that their financials are in a much better position. We can help them achieve the maximum amount. So if they get 3 years of really clean financials, then we've got a year to plan about getting it on the market. Then we have a year to put it on the market and get them a sale by the time they really want to exit. That's why we always
Wow.
say 5 years out is like optimal. 3 years is okay. Um, Somebody calls us and says, "Hey, I want to sell next week." We'll take a look at it. We'll give them, I always say we educate business owners on where their business currently stands, what we think it will command on the market for a sale price, and how um, readily available we think the buyer pool might be for their business in its current condition. That way, they have the information; they can make those hard decisions
Yeah.
on where they want to go in the future.
Wow. Okay. I did not realize, obviously, because I've never been in that position and I just started, so that's not even, but even when you're just starting, you want to make sure that you build good habits sooner than later, right? If
Right.
you eventually do want to sell it in a few years, whether that be in 20 years, it's so much easier to correct that beforehand than it is so much later down the road, like you kind of mentioned. So I'm guessing I'm kind of hearing that people should really talk to you kind of as soon as possible and really see what they need to do to make sure that they're getting the best kind of bang for their buck.
Prepare for the future. That's it. And you
Yeah.
want to you want to be able to maximize that value when you do go to sell, and make sure that the business is in a great position to sell. If a
Mm,
business has, clean financials, they don't have customer concentration issues, they don't have supplier concentration issues, they've got a good product or service that's in demand. There's a pretty readily available buyer pool that's out there, and we stand a better chance of getting it sold. If they have issues with their financials, they don't have good record keeping, they don't have a lot of net profit, it's not going to pay a buyer a good return on their investment. They're not going to be able to get we can't get bank financing because the financials aren't good, but they still want $500,000 for the business. Yeah, there's a lot of times we tell them it's like, hey, it's you're not really in a good position to sell at all, and
yeah.
there's a very small chance of us finding, a buyer that's going to be able to meet your terms and demands.
I think a rule that maybe business owners should kind of think about more is that if you aren't able to easily explain maybe your role or what's going on to like a newbie, then it's probably like, oh, I know a lot of business owners, and I'm speaking from experience of my family owned a Chinese restaurant up in Michigan. And my aunt, she ran everything. Like when I say she ran everything, she ran everything. Like she couldn't take a single day off, otherwise, like things
She
would
was the
fall apart.
business.
Yeah. So, and I saw how exhausted that made her, but she gave some stuff to me here and there. But if she wanted to sell that business and she ended up just retiring, the whole family retired and we sold the property because we own the property. Um, but like she wouldn't be able to kind of train someone and have someone take over because she did so much and she was just never really thinking about what that eventual close of the restaurant would look like. So we ended up, closing the business and it just made more sense for the family and everything. So it wasn't like any hard feelings. But if someone did want to sell the business and that's what they eventually wanted to do, but they take on so many roles that they're not able to give it to someone, no one's gonna want to come and step in and do all of that because it's a lot of
Right.
work.
Yeah, it is, and it's replacing. Oftentimes, business owners, they make that mistake of they are the business, and that's why I said a lot of times it's somebody is buying a job simply because they're buying the business and they're going to replace the role of the owner, and the owner is the one who pretty much ran the business 40, 50, 60 hours a week.
Mhm.
So a buyer, there are buyers that are perfectly suited for that, and they're expecting that. There's a much larger buyer pool that's out there that says, hey, I want to buy a business that I can manage, but I don't have to work in it day in and day out.
Right.
So what that means is for the current business owners, they have to find ways to put themselves out of a job in their own company, which means they have to find
Mm.
somebody that they can train, put in place to do what they do so that they can take a step back and work on the overall growth and management of the business, but they're not actually in there doing that normal day-to-day kind of grind work. They've got somebody that's doing that, and the business is still able to operate and be profitable and things like that, with having
Mhm.
that extra layer. So that's what people are typically looking for when they want to buy a kind of a turnkey business opportunity versus buying what we call a job.
Yeah, like very exhausting because like again, I saw my aunt and how she ran. She pretty much did that my entire life, and I think she'd been doing it before I was born too. So if you can imagine at least 16 years of working every
Oh
single
yeah,
day, open to
the grind.
close.
Yeah, yeah,
I was like, girl, you're making me tired. I'm just watching you. But I love her. She's a great work ethic. She taught me a lot. The restaurant was super helpful. But yeah, I mean, I think right before we hit record, I was saying like, oh, I'm looking forward to you explaining more about what you do so people can watch and even me can have that like, oh moment. And I had multiple throughout this conversation. So I really appreciate you coming on, educating me about so many of these things that I had never thought about in my entire life. But this is super great to know. And I think also some good reminders, kind of looking back at my life and the experiences I've witnessed and been a part of. I'm like, oh, that makes
yeah.
sense. This is why
It,
everything happened like that.
it's crazy how when you step back and look at it, it all looks. You're like, oh wow, that's just common sense. But as a business owner, when you're in there, oftentimes they're the business owner is really good at whatever their craft is, their trade. They
Right.
are experts at that, um, and they've been able to just kind of keep running the business the way they've always run it, and that's their comfort zone. And that's where the issues might be. And so it's good to be able to find that out with enough lead time, get them with the right person who might be a good business coach that can kind of help them massage things and get it where it needs to be. And
Yeah.
now they're in such a better position to sell it when the timing comes. Essentially what we're trying to do is when the owner of the business is ready to sell, when they're ready to get out, the business is also ready to sell, because
Mm.
oftentimes what we see is the owner's ready to sell but the business isn't, and that's
Mm.
where you have the most challenges in trying to get something done.
Yeah, that makes total sense. In my family, we were all really blessed with how we sold everything and how we exited the restaurant business. You'll never believe this. In summer of 2019, we
Wow,
closed. And then COVID
good time to
hit.
get out.
It was scary actually how good the timing. Because my aunt, she was so good at it. She was great and she just wanted to keep on going. We are like, you can't keep on going. We should
Yeah.
sell. And she's like, no, no, it's fine. And then eventually something clicked and she's like, all right, I want to sell this summer. And it was like April. And we were like, okay, hold on.
She's in tune with her gut. Something she just felt something was off, and it's like, hey, time to
It
make
was
a
a
change.
Chinese restaurant too, and I think during the first wave of COVID, I think Chinese restaurants were hit kind of the hardest with that, with just everything that was going on. We had a very steady takeout, so I think for the most part we would have been fine, but that's just a headache. It was just a headache.
Yeah,
So prayers and thoughts to everyone who had a restaurant during that
yeah,
time. We had it when it was pre-COVID, and even that was so much work.
yeah,
But Herb, thank you so much for coming on, sharing a few minutes. This has been so eye-opening for me. I've actually also had just a lot of fun learning about this, which I was so surprised and so happy about it. So thank you again for coming on and sharing about this. I really appreciate it.
yeah. My pleasure. Thanks for having me on.
Of course, and to everyone watching, I really appreciate you as well, and I will see you next time. Bye.